All right, so welcome to part two. So in the last one, we made these four boring white balls that are supposed to be stars, and so we need to put some sort of material on them so that they look more like stars. So let's get to it. So we're just going to come into our inspector, make sure we select one of these mesh instances, and we are going to go to the geometry tab, and the mesh already has a material on it when we imported it, but we are going to, and you can access that here with the surface zero. Now you can change it here if you want to, but we're just going to go to the material override, which will override whatever material we brought in. So we're going to come down here. Sorry, I'm just going to click on this mesh and get rid of that. So we're going to come down here to geometry and material override, and we are going to click in this box, and we are going to make a new shader material. And now we've made the shader material, but we haven't made the shader yet. And so we have to come down right here underneath it, and it says shader. I'm going to hit the little down arrow, and we're going to click new shader. And when you first pop up, you might see it's probably going to be selected as shader for you. But we're going to do a visual shader just to sort of follow along the video. And sometimes it's kind of fun connecting the wires, so we're going to do it that way. And we're just going to name it. And I want to name it Star Shader .tres. And we're going to hit create. And we should see down here that the shader now has this area, and we can click on it if it doesn't auto-activate. Most of the time it auto-activates. For some reason it didn't, and you can see down here on the lower left corner in our file system we have now created a shader TRES. Now we are going to eventually save this material, because when we make instances of it we need a reference to the actual material, and so we will eventually save it, but let's get the shader working first, and then we can work on that in part 3 when we start instantiating the objects and putting this material on all of these instances of the stars we create. All right, so you'll pop open the visual shader panel. I'm going to make this bigger so that you all can see better. I don't know if I can zoom in more. Let's see. I don't think so. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, so you get this big output guy, and this is going to be the output that has all the different pins, normal maps, roughness, albedo, which is the color of a 3D object. But since we're making stars, we really just need them to glow, and that is where we're going to use the emission. And for the emission, we need to give it a color that is going to represent. And so the way we can do a color is we right-click and we type color. You can also just pick through if you don't want to search for it. You can also kind of come down here and look at all the various nodes that are available to you. For instance, color common, you can get color op, there's variables, and the one we're interested in is under color and variables, and it's a color parameter. So the color constant just means it's a color that will always be the same no matter what. The color parameter means we can change it later with code or accessing it or in the inspector. And so that's what we want. So we're going to start here with a color parameter, and we're going to hit create. And up pops this box, and we can give it a default value so we can kind of see a color. Default value starts out white, but let's make it pink like he did, or maybe like a kind of a magenta. And we can just take this color off of this pin. Now you can click this preview, go away. So you can click this preview and you can see a bigger swath of it, but I mean, you can already see the default color, so we're just going to leave it small, and we're going to plug this straight into the emission. And now you can see that our ball here, the top ball, which is the one I had selected that we added this material to, is white. Now, as you can see, even though these are all using the same mesh instance, these are all the same mesh instance representing the exact same mesh, we can actually see we can apply different materials and different shaders to each of these materials and get different things. So that's how we can. That's one way to make the stars variant, is we can change that. The other thing we can do is do some of the shader stuff. So since we're kind of following along his tutorial, but in Godot, let's just keep with that and do what he does. So what Now maybe you're done. Maybe that's all you need is you just need a star to glow and you're done. Now, unfortunately, this is not a very bright emission. In fact, it's barely any at all. So how do we kind of make it really glow? And for that, what we do is we just multiply, right? We want to overdrive the number going into this emission, and that will bring us some more color. Now, albedo, for example, and why don't we do the emission first? So what we need to do is we multiply it, and we need to multiply. And since the color is a vector 3, so it's a vector that contains red, green, and blue, right? RGB values. And then frequently we'll have a fourth value, alpha, which is the transparency. But since this is a glowing material, we don't need the transparency channel, so we'll just use a vector 3 to represent it, since all of this is just going into the emission. But what you can do is you can multiply, you can use something called a scalar when you're multiplying the vector 3 by a single float, and that will just multiply the R by that same amount, the G by the same amount, and the B, the blue, by the same amount. All right, so let us get a scalar node, and we can just come here and click Add Node, and we're going to look for a float. Now, when we search for float, you're going to see a bunch of different things. There's switch float, float func, float op, but what we really are looking for is under scalar variables, and we can either pick a float constant, which is something that we won't change, or a float parameter. And I think we want a float parameter because we might want the glow to be more or less depending on, and change it in the inspector so that we can easily sort of access it. So I think we're going to pick a float parameter, and we're going to hit create. Now, as you can see, we now have this float parameter. We can again give it a default value. Let's give it a default value of 10. And now we have to multiply them. And so we can just come in here, and we need a multiply node. So we're just going to use, you can either search for mult, or you can use star. And you're going to get a bunch of different multiplies when you do this. You're going to get scalar functions, which are going to do multiply, add, negate, or you're going to get operators, which can take two different values in, of course. But these are all float int or unsigned. And that's not going to be helpful, because if we plug it into there, if we plug one of these ones into there, as you can see, so let's just pick this float multiply. If we plug in our color, and we plug in our float parameter, and we plug this into the emission, they're all just going to be white. Now, we've overdriven it, right? The white is there, but we've lost that vector color information. So we need, this is the wrong multiply. We need to preserve that. And so we need to come back in here, it's already selected, and come down here to the vector functions, and we don't really need a function so much as we need an operator, and we need the vec3 multiply, and that is this middle one. So it's vec2, vec3, and vec4. So let us pick vec3 since we have three colors. And now, when we plug in this to the A and the float parameter to the B, and now we plug it into the emission, now you can see we're retaining our color information and scaling it up by the scalar factor of 10. And that is making our orb glow even brighter. You know, as we come in here, you can see there's light emitting off of it into the world and lighting those particles hot pink. All right, now these are parameters, which means we can name them, and color parameter is probably not a great name, so let's come back in here. And as you can see here on the right side, it gives you a So as you can see here in the right side, we can actually see these parameters. Here's the color parameter, here's the float parameter, and even if we come over to the inspector here, we can see that under the shader, with the shader clicked, so for instance, if this is all collapsed, you can click here, then click on the shader, and you don't even need to click on the shader. You can see these shader parameters, and this allows us to change these values right here. Now, of course, it's called color parameter, float parameter, which is not great, so let's change that to, let's call it star color 1, because we're going to try and make this have two colors and fade on based on distance, and we hit enter, and you can see it already changed this value here to star color 1, and over here in the inspector star color 1, and we are going to call this let's say glow. This is called glow, and hit enter, and that will update everything, and now we have our parameters renamed. All right, so we've got so use middle mouse button to pan, not right click, which is a little different. So all right, we've got these two colors, so we need another color. The trouble is we have to somehow figure out a way to mix the two colors together. But let's start out with just another color. So we're going to just come in here, right click, and type color, and we need another color parameter. And we're going to create. And we'll call this star color 2. And we will come in here, and we will give it a default value. And let's make this one blue. More of that kind of blue. And we will click off of that. And now what? Okay, so we need to put these two together somehow. We are going to need another multiply node, assuming we're going to keep the same sort of glow parameter. But let's figure out how we are going to mix these two. So we are going to need some room. Now, the traditional way is, and in most other shader languages, it's called a lerp node, and lerp just means linear interpolation between 2 points, and you can do that with any vector object, but in Godot it's called mix. So we need a mix node, which is the same as a lerp node. So we've got these two colors, and now we need, and we have this multiply here, and let's just move this one up here and give ourselves a little bit more room. And let's zoom in and let us add a node called a mix node. And we need to mix two vector 3s. So we are going to make sure we're under vector, make sure you're not under the float mix, but instead a vector 3 mix, so we don't lose that information. And we're going to hit create. Now, as you can see, we're going to have two different vectors. And so let us have a look at these. So let's plug in, oh, and you know what? We need another multiply node to multiply this value. So let's do that. Let's hit the star. And again, we need to come down to our vector 3 multiplication all the way down to the bottom. And there's vector 3 multiply under operators. And so we click this here. And just like this one, we need to plug in our second color, and we'll just put that at the bottom. And we'll use the same glow intensity just to make our lives easier. But you could certainly have these glow different levels by just adding another parameter from glow 1 and glow 2 so that your star's colors have different intensities. But just for simplicity's sake, we're going to have the same multiplier. And we are going to plug this guy now into our mix node on the top, and this guy onto the second mix node. So that's our A and our B. And they mix based on, and now we're going to plug this mix result into emission. And they mix based on off of the weight. So if we look at it, when all of these parameters are 0, 0, 0, 0, we get all vector A. So that means that 100% of the output of this is going to be all this color. And let's say we set it to 1, 1, 1, and 1. You can see, and actually you just need to do the first one, but as you can see, this is going to, oop, what did I do wrong? Multiply. I mean, I guess that's a blue. It's hard to see in this environment. But doesn't look terribly blue. Let's see. Let's lower it a little bit. Now it's purple, but because it's emitting the purple light, it looks pink. Let's maybe do green. Maybe that'll just look a little more a little more vibrant. Okay, there we go. So now you can see it's glowing bright green. Sorry, the blue, I think, in the world environment is just making it look kind of pinkish. But now we can see when we're all at 1, we're there. So we need some way of controlling the color based on how far away from the camera this is, right? We want stars further back to be green, stars that are closer to us to be red. Or this magenta, or color 1, whatever you picked for color 1, and the stars that are further away to be this green node color 2. So we're going to have to plug something into this weight to make that decision for us, right? We need something that will calculate that distance. And the node we are interested in, and I'll explain it in a minute, but let's move this closer here, is we need something called a vertex node. So let us add a node called vertex. And it should be under input fragment vertex, and it's a vector 3. And as you can see here, let's hit the color, you can see it just is black. But what the vertex is it's 3 different nodes in the RGB, stored as RGB, or X, Y, and Z. And the vertex A is, or X is how where the pixel is to the right compared to the screen, where Y is going to be the up. So remember in Godot, the axis Y is up. You can see here on this green axis, Y is up. Blue is the x-axis, and that's, here we go. Let's rotate it this way. So red is the x-axis, and there should be a gizmo up here that can show you which axis is which. So red is x, and that's the positive x direction. Y is pointing up. If you flip it around, you can see that now the let's see. Now we can see the x is over here pointing in the other direction, but that is the positive x value, that is the positive y, and that's the positive z value. All right, so what we want is the depth, and that is the z-axis, and that is going to be and that is blue. And you can see they color-coded this for you to already kind of tell you RGB, red is x, green is blue, green is y, and z is blue. So the z parameter of this vector 3 is how far away that vertex is from the camera. So from where we are sitting, where our eyeball is, to where that is in virtual space, that is how far it is. Now, if we just come off here and we can do a break, let's see, vector, let's see, composition, and we want a decompose. So we want to decompose the vector 3. So we'll go here to vector 3 decompose, and now we can take our vector that is from the vertex, and we have these 3 different values. And the one we care about is z. All right, so what happens if we just plug in the z straight away to this? Well, if you see, it is turned a very, very bright magenta. So what that means is whatever we're plugging in, now lerps ideally go between 0 and 1, and that's the value range, right? Where 0 was this bright magenta, and where 1 is this bright green. So obviously what it means is whatever we're plugging in from z to the weight means we have moved that needle way past 0. In fact, we've moved it significantly in the negative direction. And Godot's distances, just because the way the camera is looking, we're looking into the negative plane, so it's going to give us that distance as a negative. So if we want the positive values, which we do want, because it's just harder to work with the negatives, we need to times it by -1, and that will give us the positive distance from 0 being where we're at to where in the plane that vertex is. And so we need to multiply And you can actually use the negate times -1 if you want to, or you can just do it yourself and multiply by -1. We can just use this negate as it just needs to be a float. So float negate, and we can create, and we can plug that in, and then we can plug this into the weight, and boom, we've got green. But the problem is, remember, a lerp node ideally goes between 0 and 1, and anything past that is just going to blow way past that line and give us a huge value way past this default value. And we don't want that. So what do we need to do? We need to clamp the value. And we need to clamp it between 0 and 1. So let us do that. Clamp. And we're going to clamp a float. So we need the functions, scalar functions, clamp, float, and hit create. And we're going to plug that into the, plug that, let's zoom in here. So we're going to plug that into the 0, into the value, and then 0 and 1 are going to be the maximum values that we get out of that. And now you can see we're back to our mint green, our bright mint green color, meaning we are now at a full green. But what's interesting is if we get really close, right? So right now, what are we saying? We're saying, well, okay, our Z value is positive. If we're way out here, remember we're basing this on meters. So, each of these grid axes is 1 meter. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, plus, whatever the hypotenuse of this triangle is. And we're about, one big block is 10. So we're at 10. So this value coming into here is 10. And then 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And now we're finally at 1, right? We're about 1 meter away. And you can see the color is starting to change, right? It's turned white, and that means that we're at least at somewhere between 1 and 0, right? Because otherwise, if we were at less than closer to 0, it'll get pinker and pinker as we go. Now let me see. Let me see if I can turn down the move speed very slowly and come in here, and we can see maybe it's turning a little redder. You can see the haze around it is redder, and as we get out, it's turning whiter and greener. So we definitely are starting to finally be in that range. But of course, that just means that for this stars to change color, we need to be this close to it, which is not great. So how do we increase our distance to where this effect happens? Well, that's easy. We just need to subtract from this value. The more we subtract, the further away this color change will happen. And so that's the next thing we need to do, is we need to subtract away from the distance. We still want the clamp, so we want all of this stuff to be before we subtract, right? Because we want the thing to be positive, otherwise we'll be just subtracting from a negative, which will just make it even bigger before we negate it. So we are going to negate it, and now we need a subtract node. So we're going to subtract, and we're just subtracting one value, that Z value, subtract, float, subtract. And again, you can use the minus operator. You can use the minus key. So we are going to subtract a value. Oh, and you can see actually when you kind of move the nudge an unconnected node in, it'll auto connect, which can both be helpful and also very annoying, depending on where you placed your node. All right, so we're going to subtract, and what are we going to subtract? Well, let's give it ourselves a parameter, right? We want to maybe adjust the distance. So let us create yet another parameter. And we're going to add a note, and we're going to do a float. I'm going to search for float, and we want a float parameter, right? Because we don't want a constant. We want to be able to modify this. And we will call this star fade distance. And we're going to subtract this. I'm going to set that parameter, and let's give it a default value of, instead of 1 or something, let's do 10. So it gives us, or let's do 5 actually, so we can see what is happening. Let's do 10. I changed my mind. 10 it is. Final answer. Okay. So immediately you saw what happened to our shader, right? At 10 meters now, we are closer than 10, right? We are like maybe 5 meters away from this ball. So if we're 5 meters away and we're subtracting 10, we're now at negative 5. Um, right, this value coming out of here is negative 5, but we're clamping it to 0. So now it's not going to get any pinker than pink. If we didn't clamp it, it would be very, very bright magenta. Okay. So, but as we come out, let's turn down that. As we start to slide away and we get closer and closer to 10 further out, and let's get rid of that, you can see, oh, I am ridiculous. So let's see. Did I do this backwards? Oh, nope. Never mind. This is about 10 away. Apparently I can't count. Well, I guess that's right, since that's a little bit elevated and we're now at 11. So right about here, 10 meters away is when we're going to start. So let's actually make this value 5, and we can come here to star fade distance, and we can set the value to 5 here so that we can see this a little bit more up close and personal. So hello, did it change it? Yeah, let's change the default value here. Okay, 5. I don't know why it didn't update there. Anyway, so we moved it to 5 here, and you can see now we're green, but as we get a little bit closer, we're turning blue. And let's actually even set it down to maybe 2 so we can see what's going on a little bit closer. Maybe even 1. And let's turn down our speed volume. All right, now let's look at it in the viewport a little bigger. And as we start to back away, you can see this white edge starting to get bigger, right? We're all pink. We're now a little further away, and you can see it decimated already, because remember, this one was that object that had the really aggressive LOD fade, but let's actually get rid of that, because that is going to be a little distracting. So let us come back to our geometry, and I think we had the LOD bias is 0.2. We're still going to remember that value because we probably don't need it quite as high as it is. And now you can see we're retaining our full mesh without decimating so aggressively. But as we start to back away, and let me unclick it, you can see this white circle starting to form. And we are at, I believe, what did we set our parameter to? 1. So we are subtracting 1 away from this. So when this is, when we are 2 meters away, right, -1, we're still at 1. But when we start to get to 3 meters away, now all of a sudden you're starting to see the pixels that are furthest from us right at that 3 unit line. Now remember, this is a sphere, so that part of the sphere that's closer to us is still less than 3 units away. So this area here on the edges here is now at about a 0.5, right? That's where that 0.5 mix was. And as we step out a little bit further, more and more of those pixels are getting to be in that range. And actually you can start to see a little bit of a green glow starting on these pixels over here. And as we back away further, we'll start to see the green really start to fill in. You can see it getting greener and greener, and now you can see this green edge starting to fill in, because these ones that are closer to us are now closer to 0.5, whereas the ones further away are now getting even more larger, right? They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So now we're like at, these are 0.5, these are starting to be now 0.6 or maybe even 0.7 away from us, and 0.7 is closer to this green function on that lerp node. And then finally, when we fully reach past, once we finally reach past 2, meters away, 2 becomes 1, right? And we clamp it at 1. So past 2 meters, when all the pixels are 2 meters away, I might have been saying 3, so I apologize about that. But once they're 2 meters away, 2 minus 1 is 1, and now they're all going to be green. So this gives us the ability that as we get further away, as we get closer to a star, we turn it pink. As we get further away, we will turn it green, and somewhere in the middle will be that. Now, as you can see, it's pretty aggressive, right? You can see this. Let's actually turn down the glow intensity a little bit, because I think that's getting a little distracting. And once we've rid ourselves of the world environment, it will get even more. So now we can see the color a little bit better. So as we increase this distance, let us make this subtraction, the star fade distance, let's make it 5, right? So now anytime we are less than 5 meters away, or less than 5 meters away, that number is going to be hard 0. And as we start to get further than 5 meters away, we'll see this transition happening. Now you can still see it's quite a significant transition, right? You can see this like sharp pink line and this white going away. So how do we kind of make that a little bit smoother so that we don't see the stars just kind of turning green and blue in these like little rings? And the solution to that is to simply divide. Dividing will make this much more, will reduce this effect in terms of its intensity. So we can come here and we can come after. Oh, I added a float parameter for no good reason, so let's delete that. So let's pop this open and let's see how this effect happens. Yeah, okay, so now we've got this edge. Let's actually make the distance a little bit shorter so we can be a little bit closer to see how. So let's make it 1 again. So when we fly in right about here, we can see that kind of harsh transition. And I'm going to turn down so again, hold down right click and scroll down to reduce the rate at which you move when you're holding right click. So we can see already that that's a pretty aggressive border. So let's kind of come here and let's make that fade a little bit more. So let us add a divide node. So divide, and we're just going to divide a float. So we need the float divide and hit create. And now we're going to pop this in. Ooh, but okay, we're going to pop this in here, and we're going to pop this one into our float that we're clamping. And now we're dividing by 0, which is not something you want to do. I'm glad it doesn't crash you. But let's divide by 4, and let's see what that looks like. So 4 has now sort of made that effect much more subtle. See that? So now it's fading in, and you can still see a little bit of that harsh pink happening, and then it's hopefully will start turning greener as we get further and further away. Remember, we're dividing by 4, so now you have to increase the distance by 4 times as well to have that effect, but the effect itself is much more gradual. It's no longer got that harsh border, and we can even increase it to say like 10. So let's increase this value to 10. Come on. 10. And we can start stepping away, and it's going to stay white for a long time because when we're in that borderland, dividing by 10 is going to be pretty close to this middle. But as we start to come even further, it slowly transitions from green to white to pink. So it's not so awful and abrupt. And you can see you're not seeing that ring just suddenly come into the distance. I mean, you can always still see that it starts out more pink in the center and then fades to white, and then the green should start to come in off the edges and then fill in the middle. And you can see that happening. Hopefully you can. All right. So the last thing we want to do is, well, we want to control over this number. So you guessed it, we're going to make yet another parameter, and let us do that. So we are going to add a node and parameter and we wanted a float parameter, so here it is, float parameter, create, and we are going to plug this into here, into our divide node, and we're going to call that, we're going to give it a default value of, let's say, 10, seems pretty good, and we are going to change that to star fade intensity. Okay. Or color fade intensity is really what it should be. And now we can see we have this nice shader that has all these parameters that we can set. And ideally, we will see that in action. We can come out back to the inspector of this guy, and we can change its shader parameters. So we can change its glow to, let's say, 15, and hit enter, and now it made it brighter. Or we can make it 5, or we can make it 1, and that removes most of the glow. Let's make it like 5 again, and we can set the color, the fade color, to be, instead of we can make it the blue that we wanted. So we can do that, and we can make this first color, let's say, orange, and we can do that. And now we should fade, so it's now purple, but as we fade in, it should start getting more orange. And I guess that's orange. And then as we back out, it's going to look more... this purple really just... this blue really just refuses to be blue. Here, let's just set it completely to blue. Because any red in there and green seems okay. So now we finally have like a blue, and we should go from blue to orange, and we do, and over that fade intensity. But of course we can lower it with 5 and make it a little bit more of a abrupt transition. So you can play with these numbers, and we are certainly going to, once we make this thing huge, these numbers are going to have to be much bigger to see these effects. But here's what's cool, is we can now save this material. So let us save this material, since we've worked so hard on it, and we'll call it our star material. And since we saved this resource, we can come in here and click on this other dude. We'll call it, I think it's it looks like it's MI4. And we can come in here and assign it a material. So under geometry, material override, and we can just drag in this star material that we made. Oop. Where are you gonna go? Okay, so we're gonna do the star material, and as you can see, they're different, and we can even change it, right? This one's blue, this one's pink. So as we change the materials, we can adjust the parameters. We should be able to come in here and click the shader parameters and change them to magenta, and this one can be, let's see, fade it to, I guess, I don't know. We already picked that, so let's do green again. Just pick a bright green. And now, when we come in here, oh, well, I guess that one was already green. So now we've made them similar. But as we come in here, oh, you know what? Since we're using the same material, they will have the same parameters, so I lied to you. Yeah, it's going to affect the shader parameters since we're using the exact same material. But you can imagine just duplicating this material and assigning some stars one material and some stars another material, and then you can have sort of a rainbow of different materials. But since these are all using the same exact material, therefore they will all get the same effects on it. But certainly based on their distance, you can see that we already are changing things based on distance. So this star that's closer to us is yellow, whereas the one that's further away is green. But yes, you could duplicate this material and then have a second setup. Of course, the more materials you have, the more memory you're going to be using in the shader, even though they're the same mesh instance. But I can show you that. So let's Control D to duplicate. So we'll call it star material 2. All right, and now let's assign this one star material. Let's assign number 4 star material 2. And now we can mess with it and make it pink and let's do purple. And you can see now the 2 stars have very different colors. So you just need more materials. Okay, but it's still all using the same mesh instance. All right, so I think this is a good stopping point. We now have our material set up to make our stars glow differently. And so the last thing to do is going to take us a decent amount of work, but now we have to instantiate all of these objects into code and then make this star field, and we'll work on that the next time. And I hope that this was good, and I'll see you in the next one.